Randy Sutter? Randy? Are we gathering people? Everybody could please take a seat. We're going to be starting soon. Thank you. Just a couple of minutes, please. I think we have more people than we have in this auditorium. They're still lingering in the hall. You cleaned it out? Okay, okay. All right. Well, my name is Patty Meyer. I'm the current chair of CD3. Thank you, thank you. And I will be the chair for about another week until the convention, so it's a new decade for us here. I want to say good evening to all of you here in the audience, and I also would like to welcome those of you that are streaming this event on your devices. I also would like to give a special thank you for the support that we have received from Alpha News and the Freedom Club. If you are not already an online subscriber to Alpha News, please add it to your to-do list for tomorrow and join. It's a great source of hard to believe but honest news. And I would also like to, of course, thank the CD3 team who helped put this event together. Now, before we start, and since I have an audience, it's kind of like a public service announcement. I would like to ask all of you to get involved to help make the needed changes that we need at the federal level, at the state level, and also at the local level. We are entering what I call the meat and potatoes of an election season, and our candidates need your help, and they need your financial support. Now, to learn more on what you can do, you can contact your local Senate district leadership, you can contact us at CD3, or you can contact candidates directly. If you would like to send a note to us on our website, which is CD3MNGOP, we will be happy to direct you to the proper sources. The other critical area that we need is support for election and ballot board judges. You can sign up on MNGOP and click the election protection link to find out how you can help. In 2020, the DFL had 20,000 statewide election judges. We had 3,500. You wonder how things happen, perhaps. So let's try to even that playing field. Now, you've all come here tonight for our congressional forum, and I would like to introduce tonight's moderator. By day, he designs network security software, and for fun, since 2004, on Saturdays from 1 to 3, he hosts the Northern Alliance Radio Network on the Patriot 1280. And he also is the person behind the Shot in the Dark blogger. At this time, I would like you all to give a warm welcome to Mitch Berg.
Oh, working in radio, you don't hear applause very often, so that was refreshing. That's really cool. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We're going to get to the candidates in a moment here. I just got to say, in the words of that great Republican Clint Eastwood, I forget if I've hosted 4 of these forums so far, if it's been 5. Fact is, I've lost count. So, do you all feel lucky tonight? Good, because I feel lucky tonight. Thank you all for coming out here tonight. I love coming out to CD3 because I live in St. Paul. I know, right? And I love being out here because out here in CD3 you get that nice smell of prosperity and competence and government that doesn't get in people's way. The things you get from a functional two-party system, which is where you all come in. We got to keep this a functional two-party system out here in CD3, so that's what we're working on here tonight. Anyway, happy to welcome you all here to meet our candidates for Congress here in the 3rd Congressional District. In alphabetical order, they are Mark Blaxill, Adam Schwarzy, and Tom Weiler. So we'll be introducing the candidates in a moment here. The agenda for this one is a little different. Like I said, I've done a bunch of these events so far. Usually you get throw out a question, ping-pong your way down the line, sort of like watching tennis, back and forth, back and forth. No, it's almost like watching soccer, back and forth, back and forth. It's even worse. So we're going to do it a little different tonight. We're going to have different questions for every one of the candidates. Going to rotate the order in which they answer, posing different questions to each candidate. So it's not going to be a ping-pong match back and forth. That should be a nice change, I should think. So we'll get through a lot of questions, almost all of them from you out in the audience here, which is going to be fun. We're working through those right now. We may be able to squeeze in a few more. We'll see. There are no gotcha questions. We're here to illuminate, to bring issues to you, to help you get to know the actual candidates here. So each candidate's going to have a 3-minute opening statement. And then each question will have 1 minute for response. There will be a timekeeper down front who is going to keep them on the beam here. My walk-off music is like that, and after that I'll solicit heckling from the audience, so be ready. But they said they're going to stay on time here tonight. We're going to get through as much as we can in an hour and a half tonight, which means I'll start babbling and introduce the candidates. So, since they're all unique, there's no need to rotate the order. So I'm just going to introduce them, and we'll dive into things here. So first off, let me introduce our first candidate tonight, Tom Weiler. And next, please welcome Mark Blacksall. In CD4, they can't even afford chairs. It's just pathetic. So this is much better. All right. Let's. We've introduced our candidates. Now, most of you may not be. We're going to deal with the elephant in the room here first. And we're going to deal with it first for those of you who are concerned about it. And I know my phone's been blowing up for the last 3 days about the elephant in the room. So we'll deal with that first, and then we will move on. We'll take some audience questions. We'll get through this, and then we'll get on to the issues that the rest of the CD3 is most interested in. So most of you are not aware why Adam Schwarzy is not also here in the forum this evening. He's been ordered back to his duty station. For a full explanation, I have a statement from the candidate that we'll read out loud here. And I quote, "I regret that I cannot be with you this evening. Due to circumstances outside my control, I was recently given and executed orders to return to my command in Hawaii. Due to my physical absence, I feel obligated to provide more context in regard to my military status and intent, along with the catalyst that forced the Navy to order me back to my duty station. For atmospherics, I had requested an early retirement back in June 2021, and due to many administrative errors and lost paperwork, my request was delayed. Following the traditional path of waiting for the completion of my service record, I was given approval for an April 1st separation to start terminal leave. Terminal leave provides the opportunity for the service member to separate early and return to their home of record or their next place of residency. With April 1st as my date of separation, I had planned and organized a retirement ceremony along with the official announcement of my candidacy for the congressional race in Minnesota's 3rd District. However, Upon returning to my duty station, I discovered that my return was not to start my out-processing from military service, but to instead face an investigation from two separate Inspector General complaints. Both complaints are for my public statements that have been considered contemptuous of public officials. During the discovery phase of this investigation, I was permitted to review the evidence against me, all of which are public record under the Freedom of Information Act. Within both Inspector General complaints, I discovered the documentation and records were initiated and compiled by two known individuals associated with Tom Weiler's campaign. The materials directly provided by Tom's team included 6 live videos taken by his representatives, hundreds of pictures from our gatherings, and written documentation and emails between my chain of command and Thomas Wurtzfeld, Kevin Poindexter, and Maury Weiler. I have been 100% transparent with the Navy since June 2021 that my intention is to separate early in order to run for public office in the state of Minnesota. There are programs within the Department of Defense that allow military members to transition their service to separation. In October, I have a company that assists service members in transitioning to civilian status. The Navy is not challenging my departure from my duty station. However, my commanding officer is being compelled to investigate my public statements over the last few months as I prepare to retire and announce my candidacy for CD3. More important, I fully understand that I have my separation orders and I am on terminal leave from the Navy. I remain a proud naval officer. Based on the Inspector General complaints, I understand and accept that my command may feel required to take some kind of action against me to fulfill the requirements of the complaints. I have the utmost respect for my commanding officer, and if he concludes it is necessary, I will willfully accept a formal reprimand for my actions. Post these proceedings, I do expect that my retirement from the Navy will proceed as planned, and I plan on returning to the great state of Minnesota to retire and conduct an official campaign launch on or shortly after May 5. Sounds like we have some Schwarzy fans in the house. Remember, we came here to see the candidates. Anyway, I'll continue here. I will keep everyone informed as events continue to unfold. God bless everyone here this evening, and God bless the United States of America, Adam Schwarzy. Given the nature of the statement, we will open up the floor to Tom Weiler for an opportunity to address Mr. Schwarzy's statement. Tom Weiler, please.
Much, Mitch. Well, that was an interesting version of what's transpired over the last couple months. I just wanted to say a couple things here tonight on that. After my campaign team was informed and understood that there was an open and active investigation into this issue, my campaign team simply contacted the Navy to determine if Adam was going to be a legitimate candidate. The Navy then informed us that his chain of command in the Navy was aware of the situation and had been looking into the situation from September of 2021 to present, which was before I was even a candidate in the race. Moving forward, my campaign team simply answered the questions of the Navy investigators. My understanding of the rules is how they applied to me when I retired after 20 years of service in the Navy. I retired in September of 2021 and launched my campaign in October of 2021 in accordance with the law and in accordance with the rules. Thank you.
And now we will actually, something I skipped a moment ago, we will allow each candidate who is here a 3-minute opening statement. So with that in mind, I will start with Mark Blacksall, 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. We have the mic on? Can you hear me? Good. I've had a chance to meet a lot of you and to go all around the district, and it's been a terrific journey so far. Many of you, if not most, have had the chance to hear my story about why I'm running and what my priorities are. In brief, I have said that my basic priorities are bringing common sense economics back to Washington, D.C., standing up to the new woke left, and fighting for health freedom. I'll have a chance to elaborate on some of those, I hope, with questions. But to start out, I really wanted to focus on what should be our priority, which is beating and retiring Dean Phillips. And so the question is, how do we do that? And one of the things that I think this process encourages is going deep on your opponents. And the opponents are out there, actually. And who is Dean Phillips? And Dean is actually a formidable opponent. We should not take him lightly. He is a smart, capable. I knew about some of his brands when I was in the consulting world because it was a case study. Luxury vodka, Belvedere. How can we get consumers to pay $30 for something, for a bottle of vodka that costs a few bucks and typically retails for more like 15? Well, that was a success story, and Eddie Phillips, his stepdad, built a brand around that, and I have no doubt that Dean contributed to the team that built that brand. He's a smart and effective and successful businessman. But he's been involved, that's the business he grew up in, building brands. And I think what he did very successfully when he ran against Eric Paulson was building a brand for CD3. I am a moderate, I am a problem solver. Everyone is invited. And that was pretty successful, and a lot of people bought that, and he flipped the district in a very dramatic way, one that very few people thought would turn blue that quickly. But now he's been working on his Washington, D.C. brand. And that's a very different brand. Some of you may have seen his speech on the House floor on January 6th. He was apologizing for who he is. He was attacking insurrectionists. Insurrectionists are not invited. And he was claiming trauma as his own particular privilege for January 6th. The important thing to understand is his two brands conflict with each other. And that's our opportunity going forward, and that's what the advantage I intend to press, retiring Dean Phillips in November. Thank you.
Up next with a 3-minute opening statement, Tom Weiler.
Good evening. First off, as we get started, I wanted to say hello to my beautiful kids, Claire and Thomas, and my wife, Cynthia. They could not join us tonight. They're out on spring break partying with their grandparents. I am Tom Weiler, and I'm running for Congress because I love this country, I love the American dream, I love our American way of life, and it's worth fighting for. And make no mistake, we are in a fight. We are in a fight for the future of our country. The progressive agenda, which has become the agenda of the Democrat Party and Dean Phillips, believes in redefining the American dream. They believe in shifting from a land of opportunity to a land of entitlement, from a land of parents parenting to a land of bureaucrats know best, from a country with borders to one without, from a country where there's boys and girls in classrooms to a country where it's them and theys, from a country with the rule of law to a country with mob rule. Not on my watch, not on all of our watches. We cannot allow this to occur. America and the American way of life did not just appear. It did not show up on a porch in an Amazon box 245 years ago. It was developed and thought of by great Americans thinking great thoughts, showing incredible faith, great determination, and great sacrifice. Those individuals were committed to the ideals of freedom, liberty, and virtue, as laid out in our Constitution and the United States Declaration of Independence. We are forever indebted to those Americans who forged ahead and laid the foundation for our great country. And we need to step up to this battle to ensure the country that we turn over to our kids is something we can be proud of. An America that is safe and secure. An America with a thriving economy and with a united American spirit. I am running for Congress because I believe America's best days are in front of us. But we are currently on the wrong course. And we need to turn the ship around in our district, in our state, and in our country. So thank you very much for being here tonight. I look forward to the conversation.
We'll now start with the questions. Candidates will have 1 minute apiece. Our timer is down front. He will get your attention when we get towards a minute here. And I think we'll have enough to get us through a pretty solid evening here at this rate. People are pretty enthusiastic. By the way, I will observe a little bit of discretion, and if someone mentions the other candidate, I will allow a 30-second rebuttal. There's a curveball, Mr. Timer. Be watching for that. Anyway, we'll start with Mark Blacksall. Dean Phillips calls himself a moderate, yet always, always, always votes with Nancy Pelosi and her progressive mob. That's the question's quote. How do you plan on to call him out on this if you are out on the campaign trail here, Mark Blacksall?
Well, I think I just said a lot about that, but that's the question. That is absolutely the right question. And he comes from a Gold Star family. His father died when he was an infant in Vietnam. He deserves our respect, even though we disagree with him, or we might disagree with him. The problem has become, he is becoming a creature of the swamp. And he is embracing the values of Washington, D.C. He is disinviting people that he used to invite. He is working on the celebrity marketing, the premium marketing plan of all the fancy celebrities in Washington, D.C. that he wants to cozy up with. And he's not representing the district. He doesn't care about regular working families. And I think there are too many opportunities to count to put those issues on the table.
Now with Tom Weibel. Tom Weibel, on what issue do you think Dean Phillips is most vulnerable from where you sit? Did I say Weibel? Tom Weibel?
I'm Tom Weiler. Congressman Dean Phillips.
Weiler, God.
Congressman Dean Phillips has two major vulnerabilities this time. One, he has failed to step up to required leadership in our district. Most notably, when in the summer of 2020, when our beautiful city was on fire, Congressman Dean Phillips had nothing to say. He either inflamed the situation or said absolutely nothing at all. And secondly, it's his voting record. 100% he votes with Nancy Pelosi this session. That's 100%. That's almost 100%. That is 100%. He votes with Nancy Pelosi every vote this entire session. So lack of leadership and his voting record, and he's clearly out of touch with this district and is clearly on the wrong side of policy issues with everyone in this room and everyone across this district.
By the way, if you hear a question for one candidate and you're just dying to dive in on it, raise your hand and I'll exercise a certain amount of privilege here. One from Mark Blaxill, read very carefully this time. If Donald Trump runs again for president in 2024, will you support him? And by the way, the question means 100% full-bore support of Donald Trump if he runs again. Your opinion, Tom Blacksall.
I'll take the first.
Mark Blacksall. Right. Candidate one, candidate two. There.
I believe Donald Trump was a critically important president. He redefined the Republican Party in a powerful way. I voted for him twice, and I would vote for him again. 2 years is a lifetime in politics. The man has a good life. I don't know why he'd want to put himself through this stuff again. And he's getting older. So it's tough to predict what will happen, but I'm a Trump supporter, and I think he was a terrific president. I'm proud of my vote.
Go ahead, Tom Weiler.
Just real quick, one thing to add on that is, if you look at the policies of Donald Trump's administration, I look at that from the perspective of January 2020. That was the last deployment I made in the United States Navy, deploying on the USS Eisenhower. And if you look at where we were as a country in January 2020, after 3 years of Trump's policies, we had incredibly low unemployment across all sectors of society. We had a thriving stock market. We did not have American troops dying in overseas battle. We had a secure border, and we are energy independent. So those policy issues are what we need to return to, and President Trump and his administration should deserve credit for that.
We actually have a question here addressed to both candidates. I'll allow it, since it's an important question for both candidates. And we'll start with Tom Weiler answering this one. Do you believe Joe Biden is the legitimate president? And if not, will you work in Congress to impeach him if elected, starting with Mr. Weiler?
Well, I do believe President Joe Biden is legitimately a very bad president. And he is the President of the United States. And when I get to Congress, I intend to ensure to fight against the Biden administration, which have clearly been failed policies. And I can assure you that I will have a much different voting record than Congressman Dean Phillips when I get to Congress. Thank you.
Mark Blaxill, same question. Do you believe Joe Biden is legit? And if not, will you work in Congress to impeach him?
Well, I don't think we've seen the full exploration of the concerns that many Republicans have about election integrity. And that's a difficult process to sort out, and I think we're still going through a fair bit of that. We don't get a lot of coverage of that in the mainstream media, but those are valid and important concerns. And we need, if for no other reason than we must learn the lessons of the last election and ensure that it doesn't happen again. And it was chaos. I do think one issue that doesn't get enough attention, I suspect that Joe Biden has committed offenses and the Biden family that are deeply corrupt. And I don't know whether those rise to the level of impeachment, but honestly, taking bribes from foreign governments, I mean, what else does the Constitution say? So I worry about that.
This next one can probably have some very short answers from both of the candidates. The question is, have either of you been endorsed by President Trump? We will start with Tom Weiler.
I have not.
Mark Blacksall? Seemed like a bit of a long shot, but so far.
But it's going to be huge when he endorses one of us.
That's right. Let's move to a little bit of Minnesota action here. Of course, the Minnesota Republican Party gives you the same feeling that Minnesota sports teams do. We've gone, am I right? Little bit like being an 1976 Buccaneers fan. Given the turmoil that has embraced the Republican Party, how do you plan on dealing in Minnesota in this past several years, and the fact that we have a statewide losing streak going on for 16 years now? We'll start with Mark Blacksall on this one. How do you plan on dealing with the Minnesota Republican Party going forward in this election?
I think it's really important to have a strong state party. And, politics is full of passionate people who care a lot about issues, and it's tough to keep everybody on the same page and together. I think it's really important to stay together, and if we go through a period of discord, to put it behind us and move ahead. I learned a little bit about the party last year. I was the treasurer for less than a year, but I understand the important functions that it plays. And it's actually the state party is a small operation. It scales up with elections, but it is the foundation, the thread that binds a lot of things together. And it's really important that it works well. And we should all support the state party. And I think we should all support the state party.
For Tom Weiler, along those lines, should statewide candidates who win GOP endorsement from the delegates pledge from the time of endorsement to support all delegate-endorsed candidates? It says your support of the endorsement for candidates statewide, Tom Weiler.
Yes, I think statewide candidates should abide by the endorsement and support those who were endorsed by the Minnesota GOP. Just to piggyback on Mark's answer, I think the Minnesota GOP is incredibly important for our state, and fundamentally it comes down to winning elections. The best thing we can do for the Minnesota GOP is win this election and make sure Congressman Dean Phillips retires this November 8th.
Mark Blacksall, name one issue where you differ from the Republican Party, and by the way, none is not an acceptable answer.
I need to think about that one. it's acceptable. You know, the thing I think, and I don't want to flout the ground rules and the premise of the question. I think Republicans are more together than we've probably ever been on issues. I don't see meaningful distance between Republicans on any issue. We are all, for secure borders, we're all pro-life, we're all pro-Second Amendment. We are all concerned about the rise of the craziness of the new woke left. We all here agree that we need to beat Dean Phillips. I think you'd have to get kind of far down into the weeds to find an issue in which I am in substantive dissent with the platform.
I mean, technically, we can't force him to pick something. It's a good test.
I think there are disagreements within the party on some issues, and I am more of a peace candidate than I am an intervention candidate. That's probably, and there's a division within the party between, the more hawkish elements and the more liberty and America First elements. I'm an America First person.
We'll come.
It's okay.
You planted that one, man.
Who knew a submariner
I
could
thought Mark's
dodge?
answer was spot on, so I didn't want to jump on it.
Who knew a submariner could navigate a minefield like that? That's not bad. All right, we'll go to Tom Weiler with the next one here. What are the three biggest domestic challenges facing this country, in your opinion?
Three biggest domestic challenges, I think, are clearly the three biggest issues in our district as well. Crime, we need safety and security in our communities. We need to fight 8% inflation. Every Minnesotan, everyone in the 3rd District wakes up and it hits that 8% inflation, hits them in the face every morning when they put food on the table, when they put gas in the car. And the third one is the education of our kids. That's fundamental for the future of our country, and we need kids in school learning how this country went from a new colony to the shining city on the hill for all democracy and all countries to look towards. And we don't need to be indoctrinating our kids. We need to be educating them. Thank you.
Mr. Blacksall, Mr. Weiler just listed three important issues facing us domestically: crime, inflation, and education. Respond how you'd like to, as a congressman, respond to or deal with any one of those issues of your choice.
Well, first, I think two of them are mostly state issues. I think one of the important things that I've, as a constitutional conservative, that I pay attention to is the 10th Amendment. And that says that a lot of issues aren't reserved to the federal government to engage with. In fact, they're state issues. Crime is largely public safety, and crime is largely a local issue. Education is a local issue. You don't find those questions in the Constitution, or those rights enumerated to the federal government in the Constitution. Inflation and the management of the money supply and the budget, that's the focus of Congress. And we have seen, our national debt is upwards of $30 trillion today. We're adding to it at the rate of $2.5 trillion a year last year. It's in the neighborhood of $1 trillion this year. If we spend more than we earn and we print the money, why are we surprised when we have inflation? So I think that's the responsibility of Congress, and that would be a big priority of mine: fiscal discipline.
Mr. Weiler.
And just one thing to clarify, I appreciate Mark's answer to that, and I fully agree that education and crime are issues that should be handled at the local level. Unfortunately, Congressman Dean Phillips and others have voted on bills like the George Floyd policing bill, which is a federal bill that, if passed by the Senate, would leverage additional administrative requirements on law enforcement precincts in our state and in our district, and also would have national impacts as far as taking away qualified immunity. So unfortunately, the Democratic Party is trying to reach out and touch local education and local law enforcement, and I would not support any measures that do that.
So you have both discussed Congress's, especially the House of Representatives' impact on budget and economics. So I will ask this question to both of you in this case. Do you support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution? And if so, what spending cuts or tax increases do you support to balance the budget? Please be specific. And we'll start with Mr. Weiler on this one.
Is that Tom Blacksall. No,
I'm going
great
with
question.
Mr. now from now on.
Great question. I do not support a balanced budget amendment. I think we have a spending problem in Washington, D.C. We've spent $13 trillion in the last 2 years. That's $13 trillion. Our average budget for the first 3 years of the Trump administration was about $4 trillion a year. So we've spent $13 trillion. Our revenue is about $8 trillion. So we need to reduce our federal spending, and we can do that by taking away the spending that is on superfluous stuff that is not uniquely government issues. That's what the Constitution lays out. The federal government should control and spend money on uniquely governmental issues. That doesn't include paying for community college. That doesn't include forgiving all student loans. And that doesn't include paying wealthy individuals $7,000 to buy an electric vehicle. So there's a lot of things we can do to limit our spending, and that's the biggest issue in our federal economy right now.
I will ask the same question to Mr. Blacksall. Do you support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution? And if so, what spending cuts or tax increases do you support?
I support the concept of a balanced budget. I'm not sure whether some of this stuff is theatrics and posturing. Actually getting an amendment to the Constitution passed, it would be tough to imagine that. The thing that's really important to recognize is that Washington, D.C. is a parasitic beast, and all it wants, it wants to grow and grow and grow, and it spends and it spends and it spends. There are no government programs that are ever cut. There's a political class that lives in the imperial city that wants to make their lives there. It was inspiring to actually, I went to Donald Trump's inauguration. He declared war on the swamp. And Dick Schumer told him, almost immediately thereafter, don't do that because the NSA has, bugs in your everything, and he learned, right? They made up an argument. So that's the thing we are faced with, and that's a reality that we all need to fight, and it starts with Congress.
Tom Weiler, if elected, what will be your first bill introduction?
My first move will not be voting for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. And unlike Congressman Phillips, I actually mean that when I say it. But my first bill to introduce would be a 2-year budget. We need a 2-year budget because we haven't passed a budget in this country since the mid-'90s with the proper authorities approving all 13 annual appropriations bills on time. So Congress has proven, to many of Mark's points, that they are completely incapable of doing that job on an annual basis, and they continue to play hero ball, I like to call it. They show up at midnight, the night before the government's going to run out of money, and sign a continuing resolutions. I've been on submarines pulled into Singapore where we don't have parts, we don't have pieces, and we can barely do our mission because of this sequestration going on back home. Congress has failed the American people, they failed the American military, and they're failing every year about for the last 20 years to pass a budget on time. So I think let's cut the workload in half, let's cut the number of PowerPoints in half, and let's pass a 2-year budget. Thank you.
Mark Blacksault, what do you plan to do, since this is directly a federal responsibility, what do you plan to do about immigration laws? How do you plan on enforcing those?
Well, we have to enforce it's pretty simple. We need to enforce them. We need border security. We are at a historic point. We have, 14, I have a little chart here, 14.2% of the American population is foreign-born today. It hasn't been that high in 111 years, and that is 46 million people. We are a country of immigrants. We should welcome immigrants. My family is, my grandfather came from England. My other grandfather came from Ireland. I'm a child of immigrants. There is a certain degree to which we can absorb new talent and new energy into our country. Open borders defies the very concept of a country. So we have many immigration laws. We should enforce them. We should support the immigration authorities and ICE. I supported President Trump's policies on immigration.
Tom Weiler wants in on that question.
Yes, I think the key word that often gets left out of the immigration discussion, especially with Democrats, is the word illegal immigration. There's two separate things. There's legal immigration and illegal immigration. And to Mark's point, it's called illegal because it's illegal.
Right.
So we need to actually enforce our laws. And I actually happened to work in the Office of Secretary of Defense during a couple years of the Trump administration. And I was sort of working firsthand with Customs Border Patrol, and they provided briefs to the team I worked with as we looked at DoD funding to build the wall. And guess what? Those walls were built because Customs Border Patrol showed the DoD the information and the facts and the stats that proved that they were effective. So we need to revisit the Trump policies on that and secure our southern border and minimize illegal immigration, and then that lays the foundation to re-examine our entire immigration system in this country.
Let's switch to education for a moment here. Now, education, as Mr. Blacksall has pointed out, is largely a state responsibility, and yet there is a sizable federal bureaucracy devoted to the issue. So I'll start with Tom Weiler in this case. Currently, schools around the nation are being beset by accusations of teaching critical race theory or variations of it, pared down for juvenile audiences. And other social issues like sex education, transgender studies. What do you think the role of Congress is in moderating the drive towards these sorts of programs in our schools?
Well, taking a step back, the federal government should applaud the fact that parents are getting involved with their kids' education. They shouldn't be determined to be terrorists. And really, the federal government should not have anything to do with local education. They need to step back, and we need to make sure that local administrations, state and local entities have the power and the resources to conduct the education that they see fit, and it should be a team effort between parents, administrators, and teachers to determine that curriculum, and that curriculum should be transparent. Right now, the Democrat Party is obsessed with the 3 R's of education: racism, reproduction, and recycling. We need to return to math, science, engineering, English. That's what our education system needs to focus on, and it needs to be at a local level.
Now, for Mark Blacksall, we have a question here. The original question is, how are Republicans going to end abortion in Minnesota? A laudable goal, and your probably answer for that would be elected governor. But you're running for Congress. So what do you think Congress's role, especially the House of Representatives' role, is going to be in waging the fight for life?
I think that's a state issue, Mitch. I really do. And it's the Supreme Court made a very bad decision a long time ago, and we need to have better judges and a lot of good interesting legislation. This debate is now coming back to the states, and you're seeing the heartbeat laws in a number of states and other places where there is state-level innovation that gets to drives for a new consensus that we can agree on. And those will tee up some interesting questions to the Supreme Court. But that's for the president, that's for the Senate in terms of advice or consent. You know, I'm pro-life, and that's where those battles will be fought.
Tom Weiler, similar question. Given that we have a number of issues that are very important to people that are largely focused at the state level, education, life, crime for the most part, what do you think, especially given the way that certain Minnesota representatives have used their congressional office as a bully pulpit to drive policy in the state of Minnesota, what do you think is the role of a United States representative in pushing policy at the state level, especially on social issues like abortion, education, crime, et cetera?
I think as your representative, I'll be a representative for the 3rd District. And obviously my day-to-day work will focus on issues that I can directly affect in Washington, D.C. But with that said, as an elected official, absolutely you have a bully pulpit. And in the In the Navy, I learned leadership is not an option. You can tell Congressman Dean Phillips thinks it's an option for him if the city's on fire. Is it politically a good move for me to get up and say something and be a leader at this point? And that's his interpretation of how leadership applies as an elected representative. I, on the other hand, understand that as an elected official, leadership is demanded of me. So I will absolutely work on the things I can control and influence in D.C., and also use my bully pulpit to make sure the desires on certain issues that are definitely the desires of everyone in the 3rd District, I represent and get their voice out. That would be my role as your representative. I don't want to be a politician. I want to be the representative to the people of Minnesota's 3rd District.
Mark Blacksall.
I wanted to jump in just to make one point. Minnesota gets a raw deal from the federal government. We are in total deficit in terms of the money that we send to Washington and the benefits we get back. The average Minnesotan loses about $1,000 a year in terms of the balance of payments between Washington, between what we pay out and what we take in. And that's the average Minnesotan. My guess is if you broke it down to the 3rd District, we have higher taxes and pay more than the rest of the state, so we'd be getting an even worse deal. We are next to the bottom in terms of the crumminess of the deal that we get from Washington, D.C. And one of the jobs of congressmen is to advocate for their district. And I would want to go, in terms of the local impact I'd want to make, I'd want to advocate for the 3rd District. I'd want to make sure that taxes are low, but that we are getting appropriate benefits and we're getting our fair share of appropriate expenditures.
I'm going to come back around to you now, Mark Blaxill, with a question on which you've obliquely sounded off, but I'm going to ask for a little more detail here. You said you're America firster vis-a-vis Ukraine. Let's talk about China and Taiwan.
Oof.
Yeah. So what's your policy on the United States supporting the democracy across the Taiwan Straits from the People's Republic of China?
Man, you're loading me with all the tough questions. You know, I learned in college, I was an international affairs major, and there's a question about war. War is the most consequential decision that any country can make, and we enter into war at our peril. And the definition of when a country should go to war, as I was taught it, and Tom, you've been on the front lines much more than me, so I would defer. But we need to defend our vital national interests. And that's the reason to go to war. Congress needs to declare war. We should not be going to war and policing the world. We have a national interest in avoiding nuclear holocaust. And when we consider some of our enemies who are aggressors in their local sphere of influence, I think you could argue that maybe, I think avoiding nuclear war is our highest and most important national interest.
Tom Weiler, you want a shot at that one?
I feel compelled to jump in on that one with my experience driving submarines. And I definitely agree with Mark's last point. Avoiding nuclear war, and the way you avoid nuclear war is through strength and through nuclear deterrence, first and foremost. And also, in regards specifically to Taiwan and China, and I think this is a fundamental flaw that the Biden administration just made, our goal needs to be actively deterring that conflict. Our deterrence failed in the Ukraine conflict, clearly. And although right now, to make sure China does not make a bad decision and try to go to war over Taiwan. China, I've operated against China for the last 20 years. They have a completely different understanding and different view of the future for the globe and specifically for their region of the world. And that vision and their idea of what the future looks like is not to the benefit of American citizens, and is clearly not America first. So we need to show strength now to deter any military actions from China and Taiwan.
Sticking with foreign policy and going to Tom Weiler here, as a former submariner, What does Ivan not do without a plan? No, that's not it. No Hunt for Red October fans? No. Seriously, Mr. Blacksall already gave us his opinion on this, but someone would like to know your stance on the war in Ukraine. Would you support sending U.S. or NATO forces to Ukraine? That would be for Tom Weiler.
Absolutely not. Right now, President Putin has 6,000 nuclear weapons. Ukraine was not part of NATO when the war began. We don't want to make them part of NATO now that the war is in progress. So with 6,000 nuclear weapons, that situation needs to be handled incredibly carefully and a lot differently. I hear people comparing it to the war in Syria. President Assad did not have 6,000 nuclear weapons. President Putin does. So we should not have American soldiers and American troops in Ukraine. We should continue to support Ukraine with weapons and as much sanctions against Russia to help Ukraine's position at a negotiation table, and hopefully that conflict can end as soon as possible.
I wait all night for a Red October joke, and it just doesn't ever.
I got it.
Sticking with foreign policy for a moment for Mark Blaxill here. We've had 30 years where 30 years ago we thought the need for a whole lot of emphasis on the military and on fighting wars ended with the fall of the Soviet Union. This past few years have shown us that was perhaps premature enthusiasm, irrational exuberance. What do you think should change about United States defense policy if you are in Congress?
Well, we rebuilt the world after World War II. We supported Europe, we supported Japan, we supported a lot of countries who are our enemies, and we helped rebuild them. And we rebuilt a new trade and diplomatic order that's been successful for decades. All those countries have grown up. Many of them have built their economies on the backs of American workers. And I think the importance of America First as a concept is there comes a point after we've won the war and been successful, and then we won the Cold War, that we can give up the responsibility of paying for everyone else's defense, paying for their growth policies. America has sucked it up for too long and taken too many expenditures for the world, and now it's time to put American citizens first. And that's a really important change that I would advocate for.
Tom Weiler.
Yes, absolutely. Our military needs to be focused on America first. That should not be controversial or a partisan statement. America first is the foreign policy that America should have, first and foremost. And the American military always was focused. Unfortunately, now the leadership, I think, is getting confused. The purpose of the American military is to deter war and, if necessary, win a war. It's not to develop energy policy. It's not to use woke policies to conduct social engineering. We need to get back to the basics and stick with the basics, deter war, and win a war if necessary. That should be the mission of the United States military.
Tom Weiler, you just said the E word, energy. What does energy independence mean to you, or more importantly, what will energy independence mean to you if you're in Congress, and how do we achieve it?
Energy independence is fundamental for the national security of our country. It allows America to supply the power necessary to drive our economy, which brings the American way of life to higher and higher levels without being reliant on any foreign power for their energy. And also it helps maintain our military out of conflicts, because we're not concerned with local disputes potentially, because we're dependent on their energy. So we need to do things like opening up fracking again to allow us to develop our LNG. We have unlimited, it's limited, but a huge amounts of liquid natural gas, coal, and oil that our country needs to tap into. And at the same time, we definitely need to be developing solar, wind, and specifically nuclear power. We need an all-hands approach to our energy problem in this country, and we need to regain energy independence.
Mark Blaxill, what regulations will you move?
Do I get to say?
Oh, you want to talk?
Yeah, well,
I'm looking for a waving hand, but go ahead.
America there's a basic false premise of all the left on energy issues. There's this notion of scarcity, that we don't have, that we'll run out of energy. In fact, the energy of the world is effectively a bottomless well. If prices go up, then we find new reserves. We found fracking reserves. We found oil sands in Canada. Declaring war on fossil fuels puts an artificial brake on the technological development that can give us all affordable and cleaner energy. Coal is dirtier than oil. Oil is dirtier than natural gas. All of those things we can have a clean environment and a successful economy in the world without forcing religious views about the Green New Deal on our energy industry. We can be energy independent, and we can lead the world in creating energy independence as well, and a cleaner economy along the way.
Tom Weiler, if you are elected to Congress, will you join any of the specialty caucuses for House members? If so, which ones?
You said specialty caucus?
Specialty caucuses.
I would, maybe it's the engineer in me, but I would have to look at the details of any of these specialty caucuses. I would be focused on representing the people of the 3rd District and doing my main job, which is representing the folks in the 3rd District and turning the ship around in our country. That's what I'd be focused on.
Mark Blacksall, if you were elected, what committee or committees do you most want to serve on?
Oversight and government reform would be an important one, because I think that the job of Congress is oversight, and there is a great deal of waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, and the job of that committee is a large and important one. I've actually testified in front of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and I was unsatisfied with their follow-through. We've seen some great fighters and some great warriors serve on that committee. Energy and commerce is another important one, because I think it oversees the health agencies, and I am a great advocate for health freedom and a big critic of the Health and Human Services Agency as a whole.
Tom Weiler, there was a major pandemic that paralyzed the country until it was cured by the invasion of Ukraine a few weeks back. What do you plan on doing, at least at the federal level if elected, on making sure we are never locked down again? Your views on medical freedom or healthcare tyranny, Tom Weiler?
I absolutely agree with medical freedom, and fundamentally the mandates where I do not support any of these federal mandates or mandates at the state level by governors across this country. To me, it comes down to individual freedom, which is a fundamental principle of our American democracy. And that individual freedom, guess what? Applies to healthcare, and it applies to decisions people make for themselves and for their kids. So these mandates on telling people how to dress to go to work, how to go to school, what vaccinations you need, that's completely, to me, an un-American way to look at individual healthcare. So I believe in individual liberty, which flows right into individual healthcare decisions for yourself and for your family.
Along a similar line, Mark Blaxill, the malign edicts of the expert class, that's how it's written. I just wanted to use that line all night, malign edicts, have recently been exposed in a very visible way by COVID-19. However, being labeled anti-vax, or even skeptical for that matter, is a political liability. So how do you convey skepticism of, quote, the science to the average voter, quickly, simply, and without sloganeering?
I got to back up, Mitch. That's a big issue for me. I've spent 20 years fighting for health freedom. And the thing I've learned is that the bureaucrats in Washington, they decide what policy they want first, and then they figure out what they want the study to say, and then they cheat with the numbers. And we've seen that with COVID, and I've watched that process for a long time. It's time to get better oversight. This is why I go back to oversight and government reform. It's time to get oversight on NIH and CDC and all of these agencies that make policy. It's more than just an issue of freedom. There's an issue of injury. A lot of people, including my child, have been injured by government programs and the mandates that they have placed and the propaganda that they send out there. If we had a free market in terms of health decisions, we would have much less intervention than we do today. And I think it's really important that health freedom, that's where it begins. And we have to start taking care of some of the victims who've been injured along the way.
Slight change of pace here, but it's since technology is jumping by leaps and bounds all the time. What do you think of Congress trying to change all currency to digital? And not that they're going to telegraph their preference, but what will you do to stop this, Tom Weiler?
Well, taking a step back, moving all currency to digital, I clearly do not support. But to me, cryptocurrency is a very American thing. It's current monetary system has a good relationship with cryptocurrency. I think Congressman Tom Emmer has been an absolute leader on this issue. And I think instead of pushing back on this cryptocurrency, our federal government should welcome it because it's a very American way to look at the future. And I think all we need is good regulations to ensure that it simply flows in nicely to help promote the prosperity of the American economy, which of course directly results in a increased prosperity for all Americans.
Question from Mark Blacksall. How specifically does your experience as an entrepreneur and business executive prepare you to serve in Congress?
Well, I've been involved in 40 years. I've been involved in industries across the board, from high-tech Silicon Valley industries to commodity pulp and paper factories, from automotive to information tech. I've worked in Asia, I've worked in Europe, I've worked in the US, so I have a broad appreciation for the many questions, the ways in which government policy intersects with the interests of businesses. And by the way, one small thing, no business ever talks about the public and the private sector. It's business and government. It's only the people in the government that talk about the private sector. There are so many ways in which the government can interfere in the life of business people, and the honest answer to that question is less is more. One of the great things that I think President Trump did was he was chopping away regulations, on a regular basis. And there are so many crazy little things that the government makes businesses do, and we just need to eliminate 90% of them.
Similar but not the same question for Mr. Weiler. How specifically does your experience in the Navy as a submarine officer prepare you to serve in Congress?
Well, I believe my overall experience in the military will translate well into being an effective representative for everyone in this room and all constituents in the 3rd District. And that's based on both experience, hands-on experience, drafting legislative policy when I worked in Capitol Hill for a year for Congressman Rob Whitman. Also working at the Pentagon on high-level jobs like determining how to fund the wall on our southern border, and my role as a flag aide to Admiral Patrick Walsh, the Pacific Fleet Commander, where I visited 35 countries, deployed to Japan during Operation Tomodachi, their earthquake and tsunami, and actually implemented foreign policy in a disaster area. But the other element, specifically to driving submarines, either when I was a junior officer, operating a nuclear reactor, leading a team of young enlisted individuals as we operated a reactor in the middle of the South China Sea, or my time as an executive officer on the USS Michigan, when the livelihood, the lives, and our mission success depended on my direction and my decision making. What happens in those situations, there's forged a type of leadership and patriotism that is unique to those types of situations. And I intend to bring that type of forged leadership and patriotism to DC, and I'll incorporate that as I represent all of you in Washington.
Let's turn a little bit to the campaign facing you both right now in this district. Mark Blaxill, you've spoken about your respect for Dean Phillips. Let's talk about how you beat him. What's the road to victory in a district that that defeated the previous Republican incumbent?
Well, I feel like I've answered that 3 times now. I think Dean is vulnerable. The district, I think, is fundamentally more conservative than it has voted. I think Dean appealed to that. I think the challenge is to get to him. I mean, I think Dean is going to want to hide from his opponents this time around. I think he's got nothing to offer the 3rd District. He's brought nothing back. We're dealing with deficits in terms of our balance of payments with Washington. He's voted with Nancy Pelosi 99% last time, 100% this time. He's voting with Ilhan Omar 95% of the time. He's becoming a convert to wokeism. He's apologizing for his white privilege on the Senate floor, or the House floor. He's losing sight of everyday working families. And the challenge is he's going to want to hide. He'll want to play an air game with the Star Trib covering for him. And we've got to play a ground game and a guerrilla game to call him out on those issues. Thank you.
You did answer it 3 times. All 3 of them were excellent, so thank you. Tom Weiler, similar question here. What is Dean Phillips' biggest weakness, and how are you equipped to exploit that for your electoral advantage?
I believe his biggest weakness is simply he doesn't have the resources. I'm just going to outspend him, and that's how we're going to beat him. Does that sound good? No, his biggest weakness is he's fundamentally on the wrong side of policy issues for this district. This district, we don't believe in wokeism. We believe in parents should be involved in their kids' education. We don't support 8% inflation. Anybody out there support 8% inflation? Congressman Phillips has not voted no on any spending bill that's come across his desk. So yes, he is responsible for the Biden agenda right now because he's voted to support it every chance he can. So 8% inflation, education questions, inflation, or paying $4 for a gallon of gas, and the crime that's surging across our district. These things, Congressman Phillips' votes and his lack of leadership have contributed to where we are right now. So that's the biggest thing going against him. In the years past, he didn't have a 4-year voting record, and he wasn't going to be held responsible for Biden's failed agenda. This time he will be. And I intend to be able to beat Congressman Phillips, even allowing him to outspend me slightly.
Mark Blacksall, Donald Trump won more African-American votes than any Republican since Richard Nixon's first go-around 62 years ago. Latinos came out to vote for Donald Trump in nearly recently unprecedented numbers. In your opinion, how can Republicans best connect with non-traditional Republicans, such as African-American, Latino, or other minority voters, Mark Blacksall?
I think we must. I think we need, and I think that's one of the great innovations that Donald Trump brought to the Republican Party. I've been working on inner-city economic development for 20 years. We don't want to make the inner-city residents, Black, Latino, mixed race, people of color, we don't want them to feel like they need to be on the Democratic plantation. The Democrats assume that those votes come to them. No, those communities are conservative at their core. They are religious, deeply religious, communities. They are conservative in their values. They are they want law enforcement. They want control of their education. They want better opportunities for their children. And what the federal government has done is contribute to their dependency on the federal government. We need to reinforce the leadership elements of those communities that believe in self-reliance. They believe in independence. They believe in God. They believe in all of these things. And those are issues that are bringing them to the Republican Party. We just want them to have good jobs and better wages. And that's what President Trump fought for, and that's what we can continue to do.
Tom Weiler, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with almost everything Mark said there. Fundamentally, all that we, the Republican Party, need to do is continue to tell the truth and demonstrate that there's a better way to do business. And we need to drop identity politics. We don't use identity politics. The Democrats do, and that's fundamentally what they're relying on. We're relying on the truth and good policy, and that's what's going to make us successful in 2022.
I'm going to ask you both the same question next. I'll start with Tom Weiler first. What do you expect the CD3, the Republicans of the 3rd Congressional District, to do to best help your campaign?
Well, I hopefully will be honored with the endorsement on April 23rd. And then we need to unite all of our forces. And also, I'm working directly with the NRCC right now to be put on the Young Guns program. We'll need federal resources, and we'll need local and state resources, all working together in tandem to make sure that we soundly defeat Congressman Dean Phillips. It's going to be a sort of, it takes a village. So it's going to be door knocking, it's going to be street signs, it's going to be social media interactions, it's going to be television, it's going to be TV. We'll need to pool our resources and all work together in tandem. And with that support, I fully intend to be able to beat Congressman Dean Phillips November 8th.
Same question for you, Mark.
Yeah, I
So
think
what help do you
I
need?
think I am looking forward to the endorsement of the party on April 23rd as well, and so that will be a huge plus. I think the thing that has changed that's so exciting is that the Republican Party is the party of the people now. The Democrats are the party of the coastal elitists and the Davos set. They're flying over Minnesota, taking all our money and not sending much back. We need to fight for Minnesota, and because we are a party of the people, we need to mobilize as a set of communities in the 3rd District. We all need to, they're going to spend more. The Star Trib will say nasty things about any of us. The New York Times will swoop in and say something supportive of Dean Phillips. All of that stuff that's the headwind. We're going to have to fight with the voices of the people. We're going to need the Alpha Newses of the world. We're going to need conservative alternative media supporting us. We're going to need door knockers and literature droppers. We're going to need all of the organic community that is outraged at what is happening in our country to really stand up and say, we're going to go to work for him. We're going to go work for that nominee, and we're going to throw out Dean Phillips. The change needs to come from us together.
We'll do one more round of questions before we get to the closing statements here. So then we'll wrap things up here on time. Tom Weiler, you're talking to someone who's never voted Republican before in their life, someone who has been taught for their whole lives the Republicans are the party of the rich and the plutocrats and the Orono crowd. Not Wayzata. No, we're talking Orono here. Convince them to vote for you and to vote Republican.
Oh, well, fortunately, I've had that conversation with my father-in-law. So, and the thing to stress to those types of individuals is we're open, we're widening the tent right now. The truth, like I said, is on our side. We believe in individual liberty. We believe in individual freedom. We believe in the American dream. We believe fundamentally that Americans, the best person to determine how to spend your dollars are you yourself. We trust American people to make their decisions when it comes to health, when it comes to how to spend money. So we fundamentally believe in a smaller role of government and support the American dream. So that, to me, is a very straightforward and honest conversation. We're on the right side of policy issues. We're on the right side of our love and respect for our country and commitment to provide an American experience that we can be proud of. So that's how I've attempted to convert my father-in-law, and I'm still working on that. But yeah, that's how I intend to reach out. And I've actually met those folks at some of my meet and greets already. I've had multiple people come up to me and say, you know what, I'm an independent, or you know what, I voted for President Biden. But they're here because of crime, because of inflation, because of where we are with the education system. So they're willing, those votes are on the table, and I expect to talk to them and get them on board the ship.
Same question for you, Mark Blaxill. Make the sale to a skeptical person who's considering the GOP for the first time.
Well, the thing that I think is the headwind that we face is where people get their information. A lot of people consume the media that comforts them. And we have lost the sense of free, civil, and open discourse in our public squares. And we really need to bring that back. And so the thing I always ask people, first of all, you're not going to convince someone in a single conversation to go from being a Democrat to a Republican. It's a conversation. And the conversation needs to happen with open discourse. And the first thing we need to do first thing you need to do in the conversation is to ask people, where do you get your news? What are you listening to? And respect what they say, and then counter it with facts and evidence, because honestly, the facts and evidence are on the conservative side of this debate. And persuasion is an individual exercise. And the problem is the narrative that confronts us is so inexorable, it's so relentless, that without free civil and open discourse, we'll never get there. So that's what we need, more conversation at a personal level.
Well, I'm going to get you out of here on time if it's the last thing I do tonight, but I'm going to make sure this is a good high-content event. But before we go to the closing statements, just want to throw out a couple quick thank yous. First of all, thanks to Patty and Barb, who've been organizing this whole thing. A quick shout-out to the guy who's got the toughest job in the place, because this is the first one of these events I've worked where we didn't have a blast of feedback completely rattling your fillings. So big thanks to Ben, the sound guy. And of course, the biggest thanks of all to all of you who are going to go get one of these three gentlemen elected here this fall by convincing all of your neighbors to bring everyone to the polls as many times as they're legally allowed to do, which is one. This is not St. Paul, one vote, one voter. But you're the one who's going to win this thing, so I'll give yourself a hand for coming out and being here tonight. And since Mark Blaxill got the first opening statement, I will let him have the first closing statement, and let Mr. Weiler have the final closing statement. Mark Blaxill, go right ahead.
Oh, you want me to go first again?
Well, yeah, you had the first word. He can get the last word.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. You want?
Go right ahead. 3-minute closing statement.
You want me to go first again? Okay.
Yes.
A lot of people have asked me, why I want to run, and it's a really good question because running is a huge commitment. I think Dean Phillips has served our district poorly, but I think more importantly, the conflict that he's experiencing is a part of the fundamental dissonance that we need to confront as a conservative movement and as a party. We need to win back America. We need to win back the American dream. The question for you, thank you. The question for all of us is who's going to be best positioned to take him on? And I think, Tom or Adam, they would all be terrific candidates. And I think we have a lot of talent in this race, and I think we should all be proud to be running not against each other, but with each other. But what is it about me? I asked the question at the beginning, who is Dean Phillips? Who's Mark Blacksall? Well, I'm a 63-year-old man, and I've had a 40 years of really interesting experience, and I've had some tragedy and some heartbreak in my life. And I think that's one of the things that's inspired me to fight. I am by nature, and what you would get with me in Congress, I'm an issues person. I'm not a BS marketing guy. I go deep on evidence, sometimes extraordinarily deep. I've ended up writing a few books, but numbers, evidence, arguments, facts matter. And when we get into the weeds in Congress, we need to do a terrific job at that level. And I want to fight the issues in a civil way. For 20 years, in particular my autistic daughter, who is vaccine injured, I've been motivated and in that fight for a long time. I've been canceled, I've been accused of horrible things, and most notably I've been called an anti-vaxxer. You know, we're all anti-vaxxers now in the Republican Party, because the definition expands. They want to demonize their opponents. We should be about issues, not demonizing the opposition. I'm also about common sense and sanity. I'm not about posturing. I'm not about putting on a show for the cameras like Dean. I want results. And I don't care about spending 20 more years in Washington. I want to make change. We need results for Minnesota. We need better outcomes for our kids. We need better outcomes for our country. And I'm prepared and excited to go do that. And I ask for your vote and your support. Thank you very much.
And I make all due apologies for botching the names here tonight. I've been through 3 forums where I had to keep Jensen and Benson straight, so mea culpa. Final closing statement, Tom Weiler.
Well, thank you all very much for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation. And why are we all here tonight? We're all here for the same reason. We're here because we fundamentally believe that our district deserves better representation than we have had the last 4 years. A representative who supports law enforcement, a representative who actually understands the impact of 8% inflation, a representative who applauds parents for their interest in their kids' education, and fundamentally, a representative who appreciates and understands the beautiful nature and the uniqueness of America and the American dream. I'm a strong family man. I view issues from that perspective, from that of a father of 2 young kids and as a husband. I grew up in the district and I understand the needs of the community. And I have built a winning team with delegates, donors, and constituents and voters throughout our district. As I conclude, I'm reminded of on a mission I was on to the Solomon Islands. I was on this mission when I was a flag aide to Admiral Patrick Walsh, and we visited a memorial, a monument in Guadalcanal, paying tribute to the Americans and allies who lost their lives fighting for the freedom and liberation of the Solomon Islands. And what stuck with me that day and what still sticks with me today is there was 4 young Solomon Scouts, they're called, similar to our Boy Scouts. And they were dressed up in their most pristine uniforms, which wasn't much. The Solomon Islands is sort of a difficult spot to live at times. But they had their best uniforms on. And they showed up there because I was the admiral, the commander of the Pacific Fleet was showing up, and they came there to greet us. And their appreciation and respect for the sacrifices of Americans that died for their liberation more than 80 years ago, you could see these young men had their back and died for their liberation. These young boys were 6,000 miles away from Minnesota, and yet they understood the American dream. They inspired me when I was there, and they still inspire me today to fight for this American dream. Just like the oath I took 22 years ago, I'm running for Congress to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and I'm running for Congress to ensure that the optimism and the boundless potential of the American dream is available for my 2 kids and for all Americans. I thank you very much for being here tonight. I appreciate your support. God bless all of you, and God bless the United States of America.
Good work.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Big hand for Mark Blacksall. for Tom Weiler.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. You heard what Mark and Tom had to say about what's needed now. Please, please, please get involved. And Mitch, we want to give you a little something to remember us and to think about us in CD4. You're welcome to come back anytime. Thank you, everybody.